It happened in the same 10 minutes. My name is Clara Whitford. I am 28 years old, the kind of woman people once called too quiet to lead. I never raised my voice to prove them wrong. I just learned to build louder things. This morning, in my cap and gown, I stood among hundreds of graduates at the University of Washington, the sunlight glinting off rows of tassels and camera flashes. Families waved, names were shouted, laughter floated through the air like confetti. I should have felt pure pride. Instead, my palms were damp, my chest tight, my phone pressed against my ribs beneath the gown. When it buzzed once, I thought it was another congratulatory message. It was not. Don't expect help. You're on your own. My parents had written those words as casually as if they were commenting on the weather. The screen blurred for a second. I blinked hard and locked it. The crowd around me was clapping for someone else's name. But the sound came from miles away. My parents were seated somewhere in the stands, polite, composed, waiting to be seen supporting a daughter they never really believed in. I forced my shoulders back. I had learned long ago how to breathe through disappointment. Then the second vibration came. Clara. Janet's voice crackled through the phone, her excitement uncontained. The IPO hit $1 billion. For a moment, the air stilled. I repeated the number in my head, tasting disbelief, pride, and the faint sting of irony. Around me, a few classmates turned, curious. My parents looked down from the bleachers, confusion tightening into realization. I slipped the phone back into my gown pocket, drew in a slow breath, and stepped toward the stage. The name card in my hand trembled only slightly as the line moved forward and the years behind me began to rise. I grew up in Tacoma, in a house that smelled of sawdust and weekend projects. My father, Richard Whitford, was a contractor who built homes for other people but never seemed to look closely at the one he lived in. He believed in straight lines, early mornings, and sons who carried his last name like a badge. Jack and Mason, my older brothers, were the blueprints of everything he valued. Every Saturday, they followed him to job sites, came home with dirt under their nails, and stories about the men who made things happen. My mother, Lillian, stayed behind, polishing the same spotless counters, preparing sandwiches for their lunch pails. She called it tradition. I called it repetition when I was 8. I asked to go with them once. My father chuckled, brushed sawdust from my hair, and said, "It's boring work." "Sweetheart, why don't you help your mother in the kitchen?" My mother gave me that soft warning look, the one that said, "Let it go, Clara." So I did, at least on the outside. Inside, I started building invisible things. Numbers became my tools. I filled notebooks with patterns, little puzzles no one asked for. In school, teachers noticed. I learned to solve equations faster than anyone in my class, and by the time I was 13, I'd already finished the high school math curriculum on my own. When I won the state mathematics competition at 15, I thought maybe he'd finally see me. The ceremony was small but formal. The applause felt big in my chest. My father attended, suit and all. When it ended, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "That's a cute hobby, honey, but don't forget real business happens out in the field." He turned away before I could answer. The applause still rang in my ears, but something louder had started inside me. I realized I didn't want to be seen anymore. I wanted to be undeniable. That was the day I decided if my father built houses, I'd build something even he couldn't dismiss as cute, something that could stand on its own. The night the acceptance letter arrived, I hid it under my pillow like a secret I wasn't ready to share. I had applied to the University of Washington's computer science program without telling anyone. My guidance counselor had helped me navigate the forms, smiling at the determination she must have seen in my eyes. "You belong there, Clara," she said. I wasn't sure I believed it yet, but I wanted to. When I finally showed my parents the envelope, my father read it twice, silent. Then he folded it neatly, set it on the table, and said, "You'll go for 1 year. I'll cover tuition, nothing more. You'll earn your own spending money and keep a perfect grade point average. We'll talk every Sunday. If your grades slip, you come home. No debate. My mother smiled faintly, though her eyes flickered with worry. That sounds fair, she said, always the peacekeeper. I nodded because I knew there was no point arguing. That night, I packed in quiet defiance. My brothers hovered near the doorway, teasing lightly about the city girl adventure. My father came by later, checking the locks on the suitcases like he was inspecting a shipment. 1 year, he reminded me, tapping the lid shut. Then we'll see if this computer thing is still a phase. When the house finally went still, my mother slipped into my room. She sat beside me on the bed, smoothing the edge of my blanket. He means well, she whispered. He just doesn't understand girls like you. Then she added, almost pleading, just don't let him see you shine too brightly. It scares him. I didn't know what to say, so I only nodded. The next morning, as the plane lifted off from SeaTac's gray runway, I pressed my forehead against the window. The neighborhoods below looked like toy houses, tiny and controlled, each one built from someone else's plan. I wasn't going back to fit into one of them. I wasn't going to wait for permission anymore. By the time the clouds swallowed the city, I had already made my vow I would never sit behind anyone's desk again. I would build my own. University life didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like exhaustion with better scenery. My apartment was a converted attic above a cafe near the Ave, drafty in winter and hot in spring. I worked evening shifts at a bookstore to pay rent and woke before dawn to study algorithms that made my head spin. Still, I loved it, the challenge, the independence, the quiet hum of a city that didn't know my name. By the second quarter, I had found my rhythm classes, work, coding, coffee, repeat. I kept my promise to my father, straight A's. Sunday calls, no excuses. He asked about grades, never about happiness. That was fine. I had stopped expecting warmth from cold weather. Everything changed one afternoon in the cryptography lab. I had been tinkering with an encryption method for a project, trying to make data transfer faster without losing security. Professor Ellis, a tall man with kind eyes and a permanent sense of curiosity, leaned over my shoulder as I ran another simulation. You realize what you're doing, right? He said. I frowned. Breaking my code again. He smiled. No, Clara. You're inventing something useful. You should think about publishing, or better yet, building it out. That sentence stayed with me all night. The idea of building something real, not for a grade, but for the world, lit something electric inside me. Within weeks, I'd pulled together a small team. Zoe, my roommate, who had a gift for design and understood how people actually use technology. Marcus, a quiet coder who spoke fluent Python and sarcasm. And Evan, a business major who had a knack for pitching ideas before they even existed. We met every Sunday in my dorm room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and half-eaten takeout boxes, turning my messy encryption concept into something clean and powerful. We called it North Peak Security, a tool to protect business communication without the complexity that scared most companies away from encryption. When we entered the Campus Startup Challenge, we expected nothing. When we won $50,000, none of us spoke for a full minute. I sent a photo of the oversized check to my parents. My father's reply arrived an hour later. Playing businesswoman, focus on your degree. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, then slipped my phone away and whispered to myself, then, I'll just have to make it real. Success came faster than we were ready for. After the campus challenge, a few small businesses signed on to test North Peak Security. We spent nights debugging, rewriting code, and answering frantic emails from clients who didn't understand the technology they were using. It was chaotic but thrilling until the day everything fell apart. A financial advisory firm, one of our early users, suffered a breach. Their internal system had been left unprotected, but the headlines didn't care about details. They blamed our software, calling it unstable and unsafe for enterprise use. Within 48 hours, 2 angel investors froze funding. The phone stopped ringing. The inbox filled with cancellations. Our bank account dipped below $10,000. Marcus stopped coming to meetings for a week. Zoe cried in the stairwell after a call with her parents, Who told her to quit and find a real job? Even Evan, always the optimist, began printing resumes. I barely slept, rereading every line of code, certain I'd find a flaw. When I didn't, the emptiness was worse. I had built something I believed in, and now it was dissolving like smoke. One evening, as I sat alone in the lab staring at the dim laptop screen, an email arrived. The subject line read, Catherine Brooks, Artemis Ventures. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another polite rejection. Instead, it began. I read about your product. I also read the breach report. You are being blamed for user error, not design failure. Let's talk. We met 2 days later in a coffee shop overlooking Lake Union. She was in her early 40s, poised, with a presence that filled the room without trying. She asked precise questions, the kind that revealed she understood both technology and the people behind it. At the end of the meeting, she said simply, I'm offering $500,000 for 20%. I'll connect you with a legal counsel and a public relations team. My only condition when you succeed, help the next young woman who gets told she can't. My throat tightened. I had spent years waiting for my father to see me, and here was a stranger, seeing everything. When I signed the agreement, my hands trembled so much that Catherine reached over and steadied the paper for me. Breathe, Clara, she said with a calm smile. This is what believing in yourself feels like. For the first time, it did. 2 years later, North Peak no longer fit inside the little co-working room where it began. What started as 4 friends crowded around borrowed desks had become 80 employees spread across 2 floors of a downtown building. The hallway buzzed with engineers, designers, and sales reps carrying laptops and caffeine like armor. Growth looked impressive from the outside, but on the inside, I was fraying. Every email felt urgent, every meeting endless. I slept in my office twice 1 week, dreaming in lines of code. Catherine noticed before I did. You need help. Clara, she said during one of our check-ins, her voice firm but not unkind. You're running a company, not a college project. I'm sending someone. That someone arrived the following Monday. Janet O'Neill, a woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair and calm blue eyes. She had led 2 companies through successful exits and carried a quiet confidence that silenced chaos when she entered a room. For the first week, Janet mostly observed. Then she called me into the conference room. You're brilliant, she began, but brilliance without structure burns out fast. You're approving invoices, negotiating leases, and rewriting code at midnight. That's not leadership, that's survival. I tried to protest, but she cut me off gently. Build a company that can survive your exhaustion. Otherwise, all of this dies the day you get tired. Her words sank in deeper than I expected. Under Janet's guidance, we rebuilt from the inside out. She implemented budgeting systems, established department leads, and created a hiring plan that forced me to trust others. I hated letting go, but the more I delegated, the clearer my head became. When we finally closed our Series A round $12 million from 3 major investors, Janet was the one who raised the first toast. Catherine smiled across the table, pride shining through her usual composure. That night, long after the celebration ended, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Proud of you, don't tell your father I said that. I read it twice, feeling both warmth and distance in equal measure. Then I put the phone face down on my desk and looked around at the office still glowing with leftover light. For the first time, I realized I didn't need permission to feel proud. The air inside North Peak's headquarters no longer smelled of new paint and coffee. It carried the hum of something alive, something vast. In 5 years, we had grown from a handful of dreamers into 120 employees, with clients scattered across the country and contracts from companies I used to read about in business magazines. Every wall of glass reflected motion engineers moving between meetings, designers scribbling wireframes, project managers counting the hours between deadlines. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like running 2 marathons at once. Janet's office light was always the last to go dark. One night, she called me in, pushing a folder across her desk. "The board wants to explore an IPO," she said. "The numbers are strong, the market is favorable, and frankly, you're ready." The word hung in the air public. Our lawyers began drafting filings. Bankers flew in from San Francisco, whispering projections that made my head spin. "If the valuation holds," one said softly, "you're looking at $1 billion. I nodded, too tired to react. For weeks, I barely left the office. The process devoured my time audits, revisions, strategy calls that blurred together. Somewhere in the chaos, an email from the university appeared in my inbox: commencement instructions. My degree, delayed by years of part-time classes, was finally complete. The ceremony date glared at me from the screen, the same week as the IPO pricing. 2 clocks ticking toward 2 different versions of me. Janet noticed the fatigue shadowing my face. "You don't have to prove you can do both," she said quietly. But I did. Maybe not to her, maybe to the version of me who once sat in a dorm room believing success meant being seen. The night before graduation, my parents arrived in Seattle. My mother's voice trembled when she hugged me, proud but cautious. My father looked around the sleek office, nodding once. "Impressive," he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Let's see if any of it lasts." I smiled politely, the way you do when someone mistakes your empire for luck. Outside, the city lights blinked like competing clocks, counting down to morning. The morning of graduation began before sunrise. I woke to the faint sound of rain brushing the window and the restless buzz of my phone. The bankers had been working through the night, finalizing numbers, preparing statements, making sure every decimal aligned. Janet had promised to call the moment the pricing was confirmed. I dressed slowly, trying to pretend this day was only about a diploma. By the time I reached campus, the sky had cleared to a sharp blue. The air smelled like spring and nerves. Hundreds of graduates filled the courtyard, caps tilted, gowns swaying in the breeze. Families gathered with cameras, faces bright with pride. My parents sat somewhere in the stands, my mother waving occasionally. My father still as stone. Then the first vibration came. "Don't expect help. You're on your own." For a second, I thought I had misread it. My throat tightened, but I locked the screen, forcing a smile when a classmate asked if I was okay. The announcer called the next group to line up. I moved with them, breathing through the weight in my chest. The second vibration came moments later. I stepped aside, answering quietly. "Clara." Janet's voice was bright, almost trembling. The IPO hit $1 billion. The words seemed to echo through the auditorium. Heads turned, whispers rippled through rows of gowns. "1 billion," someone repeated. I felt the world tilt, surreal and still. When I looked up, my father was staring straight at me. His expression faltered confusion, disbelief, something almost like awe. My mother's hand covered her mouth, tears shining. They called my name then. I walked across the stage with steady steps, the diploma in one hand, the phone still warm in the other. Flashbulbs sparked. The applause rose around me, sharp and distant, like rain hitting glass. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. The restaurant was one of those quiet, expensive places where even laughter sounded rehearsed. My mother had chosen it days before, imagining a family celebration. A white tablecloth, soft light, a view of Lake Union. It should have been perfect. Instead, the air felt tight. My brothers spoke in polite fragments about flights and hotels, their voices fading when my father finally looked up from the menu. "So," he began, "that was quite a surprise. You kept all this from us, your company, the public offering. Was it deliberate I set my fork down gently? I didn't keep it from you. You just never asked." He leaned back, studying me. "We could have helped. Guidance, advice, something." I almost laughed. "You told me my dreams were a waste of money. Remember, I stopped asking for approval the day you said that. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. My mother's eyes glistened. She reached for his arm, whispering his name. My brothers stared down at their plates. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I built something real. I continued, my tone even. We have patents filed, a payroll that supports more than 100 people, and contracts with 40 major clients. That's what you call a phase. My father's jaw tightened. He looked at me for a long time, then muttered, impressive. It wasn't pride. Not really. More like a reluctant surrender to a truth too large to deny. My mother wiped her eyes, murmuring that she was proud. My brothers nodded quietly, unsure whether to smile or stay neutral. Outside the window, the lake shimmered against the afternoon sun. I watched a sailboat drift lazily across the water, its white sail bright against the blue. For the first time, I felt no need to win, no need to prove anything. The victory I had chased for years wasn't revenge after all. It was release. A few quiet weeks passed after the IPO. The noise faded, headlines cooled, and the city returned to its rhythm. For the first time in years, I had space to breathe. I spent mornings by the window of my apartment overlooking the sound, sipping coffee while the fog rolled in over the water. But even in the calm, I couldn't shake the thought that the story shouldn't end with me. So, one afternoon, I sat in Janet's office with a folder of legal drafts spread across the table. At the top of the first page were the words, "The North Peak Fellowship. $50 million in my own shares would fund scholarships for young women studying cybersecurity and computer science girls who reminded me of who I used to be, standing on the outside of the room, trying to be seen." The first recipient was a 19-year-old from a small town in Idaho named Mia Harper. Her parents had told her that technology was for men with suits and calculators. When I met her in our Seattle office, her hands shook as she held the acceptance letter. "This changes everything," she whispered. I smiled, recognizing that same fragile fire I once carried. That night, I returned home to a sky clear enough to see every reflection on the bay. My phone buzzed a message from my father. "Saw your interview. Well said. No apology, no warmth, just acknowledgement." Somehow, that was enough. I set the phone down and stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights pulsed softly below, steady as a heartbeat. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing in the quiet, letting it settle into something peaceful. Turns out, I whispered to the night, being on my own was exactly how I learned to stand.